Okay, I'll grab my seat. Hey everyone, we're gonna start in a sec. Okay, we're gonna start now, so the door is closed. Please have a seat. So this is not the last session, because after this session you're gladly invited to join the closing reception at the restaurant where you had lunch. But before we proceed to some festive lunch breaks and closing ceremonies, we will continue on the topic of health innovation. So beforehand we had a panel discussion, or rather a round table with investors, with policymakers, corporates, talking about how can we support the innovators, how can we build up the innovations. And this session will be devoted to three examples, three speakers building up and supporting the innovation engines within their countries, and the practical examples, practical case studies, practical technologies, and the ways how they cultivate innovations in their own regions. And then we will continue with a quick fireside chat, so the audience is gladly invited to ask questions, share their opinions with the speakers, and let's move on. So we will start with our distinguished guest from Tartu, Jaanus Pikani, so medical doctor and innovator himself, and he will talk about the Estonian Biobank as an engine for boosting innovations in Estonia and beyond it. So I will ask the technical team to put the presentation on.
Yeah, thank you very much, Arnolds, and it's a pleasure to be invited here to share our experiences. It's a sort of excursion back to like 20 years when we started this, and this is just one example. It's not, the ambition is not to cover everything what we have been doing in Estonia to support innovation, and it covers only the small part, and it's dedicated to one specific example. So I just to remind you where we were 20 plus years ago, and this is one cartoon is from New Yorker, where the person coming to the pharmacy will actually deliver her sequence, and then there will be personalized medicine actually dispensed. And at the same time, as you might remember that 2001 was a year when the first human genome sequence was published. And this meant that there was immense hype. Everybody, or at least in this more closer to this area, thought that there will be major breakthroughs in the next 5 years. We will have this reality, what was actually depicted here in this cartoon. So this was actually also an idea from a professor, the Andres Metspalu, and he came to me, and we started to think what we can do. And in one year we were able to actually pass a law, because when we think that we need a population-based biobank, then the first thing was to make it sustainable, and there was a special law drafted on the Human Gene Research Act, as we called it, and the main aim of this, of the tasks for the chief processor was that among the other things, to promote development of genetic research and collect information it was that there was one important goal was that it should be used for implementation of the vision for personalized medicine. This is a general overview about what has been our journey from 1999, from the idea inception to the legal environment. But one of the most foremost important part is actually that in Estonia we had already by this time and now more developed a digital infrastructure, which actually is based, or governance infrastructure, which is based on unique ID number for each person. It was started already 1989, so 10 years before, and by this time we had already some important steps where we had close to launch X-Road, which is the main platform for exchange encrypted information. I will show it in the next slide. But there was a lot of activities then to see how we can start this. We were starting a company. There was investors involved. It was like a first and biggest investment, in VC investment in Estonia, like $4.5 million US. We enabled to reach to the first 10,000 gene, we call it gene donors by the law. These are people who are engaged by 2005. But meanwhile, the environment changed. So initially, that was idea that we will build up in private-public partnership with investors. But after the stock market crash, what we perhaps some of you can remember, there was possibly no way to actually continue with sustainable funding for this type of activities, because by then, by 2004, people understood that this will take more time than just 3, 4, or 5 years to get the commercialization results. And then there was major revamp, and the whole project was transferred to the public realm, and it was housed under the Tartu University, and government took over for financing of the project. The negotiation went on for several years, for 2-3 years. Finally, it was agreed that by 2006 that there will be constant allocations from the state budget, and they took off the quite rapid increase of engaging people, and by 2011 we were at the 4,000 participants rate, and this was done through the public health system. It means that the data collectors, as we say, were family doctors. They got some payments, remuneration for this job, and there was very positive feedback from the government. But of course, the next global crunch, credit crunch emerged, and the government already had to step back from these earlier promises. But meanwhile, these samples, what were already collected, were starting to connect to the public health infrastructure in means of data. And by 2015, we had already some initial thoughts how to start to implement the personalized medicine. A specific strategic plan was, or feasibility study was conducted, and the direction was taken to the pilot projects. We started the pilot project in 2018 to check whether the polygenic risk scores can be implemented and used for the practical susceptibility risk assessment and how to change the current way of screening for example, breast cancer, or to find the cardiovascular. So the two areas what this was piloted was breast cancer, not only the BRCA1, BRCA2, but polygenic risk scores, and for the cardiovascular polygenic risks. And yeah, today we are in the position that next year, as I show you, we are going to implement this in the practically in healthcare system, the breast cancers genetic risk profiling, and pharmacogenomics on the depression drugs. So, but everything, as I said, is based actually on quite unique structure of Estonian sort of data governance, and we called it X-Road. And the X-Road, this is working or not? No, it doesn't work on screen. So it means that whatever data is collected in Estonia, and we have a principle, you can publicly collect the data just once. You couldn't ask people 2 times the same question, because if you have already obtained the data, this has to be available for the process. And this means that there is a different databases under different sort of institutions, public institutions, and for example, if the doctor starts to prescribe electronic prescription, then the system goes and collects data from different databases by inquiry, encrypted. First, it checks if this person is actually authorized to prescribe, and then it goes just looking, is a person has been registered in the public insurance, is a drug, is a disease, what he wants for what he wants to prescribe, is eligible for prescription, and he has allowed to do this, and so on. So it's just a process which the system collects data. And finally, person goes to the pharmacy, and today we have also first type of electronic support services that are like systems which actually predicts or advises on drug-drug interaction automatically. This is just an example, but it means that there is a digital infrastructure where all information what is collected in Estonia in hospitals can be combined with the genetic data. And the other sort of precaution was how sort of representative this is. Is it really, we can say that this is a population-based, and today we have 210,000 participants or gene donors, which means that there's about 20% of all public population are actually genotyped. And this is just to show that this is more or less representatives. The gray area is what is Estonian population sort of pattern and demographic pattern, and the colored ones are showing what we have in the Genome Bank today. It shows, actually indicates that there is more active participation from females, and less active from men, but just this to give it. And so this is just, which was quite exhaustive questionnaire. It took like 1.5 hours to fulfill. And what is unique was there was broad informed consent. Of course, today there is some opinion that it's too broad, that you have to go back now to the participants if you want to use for commercial purposes. Now there's discussions among the lawyers, but still. As I said, 2,000, all the samples what we have now have been genotyped. A small part, 2,500 has been sequenced to create the reference genome for Estonian population. And there is some, through the project, there has been some same amount of exomes genotype. So this is what has been collected and achieved today in collection site. And if you look to the 100K consortium, then Estonia is on the map, of course, with 200,000. If you look to other bigger countries, of course, the numbers are bigger, but I think if you look to the whole population, 20% is probably the highest number what any country has been achieved. But of course, we are a small country, a little bit smaller than Latvia, and it means that if you present this in UK, then they say, well, this one block in London, well, of course it can be achieved, which is true actually. And just to show that the public opinion has been growingly favorable. So as you see, like 2/3 or 70% of people are actually supporting the project. So this has been just to show in, and what is actually now we have reached during this 20 years. The first 10 years was to build up, and maybe in the last now for the last 10, 30 years it has been the total number of research projects means that how many times it has been asked to deliver data or samples from the database, and this is like 360 cases, and most of them obviously in Estonia, but there is like close to 100 times which has been delivered to the foreign or outside Estonia researchers. There has some commercial entities which have been also getting the permission from the ethics committee. There's been 50 PhD theses actually achieved from based on this data, 800 publications, 2 patents, and it has taken 60, close to 70 million euros to reach to this point, both public and private financing. And now it's a major sort of new start is the European funded project, European Commission teaming project for the next 6 years, which actually is mainly based to introduce a personalized medicine, and it's financed 50 million from European Union and 50 million from Estonian government. This is of course a collaborative project with Rotterdam University and Helsinki University and Tartu University and Tartu University Clinics. So, and if we speak about a little bit about personalized medicine, this always, what is personalized medicine? There has been quite a confusion. This is one way. It's a meta-analysis or publication which actually says that it comprises different parts, and we can say that all over is personalized healthcare. But there are personalized medicine. There's a P4 medicine. There is, we call it individualized medicine and precision medicine. Maybe it's more we say about for example, tumor profiling. And personalized medicine we consider where you use genomics, information technology, and patient empowerment to actually more impact the prevention foremost, and maybe to detect these conditions that you can actually target and get to influence. So as I said, we had a pilot project which was financed by Estonian government on 2 areas to look at the polygenic and high monogenic risks and see what can be done. And this one outcome is that there was clearly indicated that there is a higher polygenic risk between the 5% of highest risk group and the lowest risk group. It's like 5-fold difference. So it means for a small portion of the population, it should be useful. And this is actually now the justification why the government has decided to, or the health insurance fund has decided to take it. Meanwhile, Estonian Health Insurance Fund also accept to have a risk. Our screening programs foresee that there is a breast cancer screening starting for age 40. But for those who have a polygenic risk already, the people who are doing this for financing by themselves, and there is revealed polygenic risks, high risk, then they will actually be provided the breast cancer screening or financed before age 50. So this is the already implemented consequences. And this might be too small, I don't know if you have to see, but it is like we just, next year, the principle is that we will start with target population group. This in breast cancer case, is it actually now we target the women starting from age 40 from next year. And then there's informed consent. And if the people have already joined the Genome Project or Genome Bank, then the data can be transferred from Genome Bank to the healthcare data infrastructure. If not, then the wet labs work should be done and the genotyping should be performed. And then there will be a risk source calculated, and then this data will be provided to the patient, because we have centralized digital patient portal where this information can be available for patient and to the doctors and to the clinics. So as I said, next year it's planned to have polygenic risk score for breast cancer and pharmacogenomics for antidepressants, and actually will be operating on the basis of this digital infrastructure, where at the time of prescribing, this system goes and makes a calculation of the score and just advises based on this pharmacogenomics peculiarities of the patient, whether and what should be pattern of prescribing and dosing. This is for the government, but in parallel, already some years ago, entrepreneurs or the specialists have been starting the private company, Jaanus, which is actually has been used, this knowledge that has been worked out at the university and at the Gene Bank to start a company which is devoted to the polygenic risk scores. And they have now reached to the 12,000 tests, have raised some money, and they have been actually getting some traction. They got already CE marked as a medical device, according to the old directive. Not they now have to actually recertification process go through to the new MDR. But as you see, they are partner in several projects, and of course it's quite a struggle, because if you don't have secured financing, then people have to pay out of pocket. And but I think it's a great achievement what they have to have achieved. And this is what you can actually go to the website, and you can get this service if you like. So I won't comment it more. So we are close to this, what we have been actually foreseeing 20 years ago, but still I think it's quite a way to go that it will be established through everyday practice. But still, I think it gives you some glimpse it's not easy. It has been taking quite a bit efforts from the different generations even, because the starter, Andres Metspalo, and when we started it, now the same institute, and is actually led by his son and his students. So it's a new generation who's taking care of this. And now, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jaanus. We'll proceed with the next presentation, led by Michael Akhras from Colibri Ventures from Sweden.
Thank you. I love this cartoon, by the way. That's great.
We'll put this back during the fireside chat.
Let's see. You guys can see behind me here, or? Yes. So my title is Crossing the Chasm Between Research Innovation and Healthcare. And I'm going to take the title quite literally here, because there is this very famous book from 1991, which is called Crossing the Chasm, and has to do with how technology or a product is adopted into society. And there's, of course, some obvious examples of this that most of us experienced. The early users of the smartphone, there was this Nokia communicator that just a few people had, and they were early adopters. And then later on, everyone has a smartphone. And then even some people go back to becoming not wanting it laggards. We've had that with social media. We've had that with a lot of inventions that are now mainstream in society. Now, looking at healthcare, this adoption cycle works a similar way. Academia and industry, they try all these omic technologies. Some fail, some work. Then later on, there is a big chasm, because when does healthcare start implementing this? And you have early majority healthcare, maybe some insurance funds in the US can sponsor very innovative translational research to actually reach patients. But countries like Sweden, which I represent, there is a big gap there before it actually comes into use, into clinical routine. And I think this whole conference has been about precision medicine, and next generation sequencing has really been taking this curve. Because we saw first the genome costing $2 billion or $3 billion, and then down to digestible levels of $10,000, $1,000, and starting to be adopted more and more into industry and academia. And now we're at the stage where it's getting affordable for the clinics, and we're seeing fantastic talks here about that. So I'm going to help guide a bit of how to kind of cross the chasm. And by no means can I cross the chasm, but I can at least give some insights for an early idea to really get implemented. So first of all, a little bit about me and a disclosure. I was inspired by Jurassic Park. That's why I went into genetics. I mean, amazing. I was a teenager and you could build dinosaurs out of DNA. First time I ever heard of DNA. Then I did my master's and PhD at KTH and Stanford. I later came back to Sweden and was working at Karolinska Institute and I was part of the team that started Genomic Medicine Sweden, which definitely took this journey. It's our genomic medicine initiative. And then later I branched out more towards commercial aspects. We started a company called Cartana, was acquired by 10x some years ago, and then Strike Pharma with Uppsala University. And I'm also a consultant for IQVIA, which is a big data health company, and joined Colibri Ventures about a year ago. So I defined these pieces of puzzle, creating innovation, supporting innovation, enabling innovation, and funding it, of course, and then if we have time for some use cases also. So creating innovation. And Sweden as example here, we actually have 55 higher educational institutions, and we're around 10 million people. And these are our resource. Some of them are larger than others, of course. And there's this research barometer. It's a fantastic publication that Swedish Research Council releases every second or every third year. So the data is a bit old. It's from 2019. But it shows you which of the universities they are, how much research they're doing. And you can see that the green factor is the bigger universities, and then Karolinska Institute is considered a specialty university, so it's in the purplish mid factor there, but that's where all the money is being spent on these universities. And how much money are we talking about? In 2019, we spent roughly almost 14 billion euros on research. That's 3.4% of our GDP in Sweden. And the business sector is the biggest research sector in Sweden. It actually accounts for 72% of all this money. So that's businesses doing research internally. And then you can see how the money kind of funnels from the upper side is where the money is coming from, and on the down section is where it's being distributed. And we do have fantastic philanthropists. We have the Wallenbergs and so on. So we get quite a lot of funding to the research sector from the private non-profit sector. But it enables these higher educational institutions to do very cool research. And it also employs some 40,000 people in Sweden. We're actually 32,000 full-time equivalent employees, but roughly 40,000. And you can see the division of some are support personnel, lecturers, researchers, postdocs, professors, etc. And altogether, the years 2017 to 2019, they published almost 50,000 publications. Varying degree of quality, of course, but it's a big resource of people generating new novelties and research and fun and knowledge. So we need to capitalize on that and make something out of it. So there in Sweden, we talked a lot about this in the panels, and it's quite unique, I think, for Sweden. There's one law to rule them all, the professor's privilege, and it's in Swedish here because it's straight out of the law book. But basically it means that academic research owns their own invention 100%. It's also their own responsibility to make something out of it, but they can take then they can fight amongst each other who invented it or who didn't invent it. But normally the postdoc gets a bit of a share, the PI takes most of the share, and the PhD student gets it's all individual cases. But it's amongst them to define who owned it. And then, of course, they need to file patents that cost money. They need to set up an organization. And how is that supported, we'll get to in the next section. But to look at, I got this question a couple of years ago, where are the companies, the life science companies actually coming from in Sweden? Are they coming from the university? Are they coming from healthcare regions? Are they coming from private individuals? And we have a unique data set in Sweden because we have Almi Invest. It's a state-owned investment company in Sweden, and they disclose every investment they ever did because it's public information also. So this is figures back to 2021. They did 100 investments, 98 until 2021. And of these investments, this is very early stage companies that get their first kind of funding from Almi Invest. 60% came from the universities. About 20% from healthcare, and healthcare, the university hospitals is closely related to the universities, but it originated from doctors and nurses and people who saw something in their clinical reality that they wanted to change or improve and innovate upon. And about 20% are entrepreneurs coming from industry, established industry. And that's always a bit difficult. How do you get out of your contract with your employer if you have a new idea? Who owns the employment, who owns the idea, and so on. And then 5% from somewhere else. So that's pretty cool to actually see that the universities are the biggest contributors of these type of inventions. Now, to support it, because, okay, you have an idea, you have a little group, and you want something to happen with your technology, you go to your university, I would say, because each university has an educational and support level. They don't charge for this, it's free of charge. So at Karolinska, which is closest to home, and I actually worked for Karolinska Innovations before, they have an InReach program which is educational. You get help with how to foster an idea, you can take classes, you can learn about business models, you can learn about NABC and all these technical terms that you need later on. The start phase actually gives you money. You get a bit of a sum, which is supported by Vinnova, where you can get your IP filed, you can get help with legal and administration, you can get help with team building, you can get certain amount for having a consultant to look at your market. And then in Drive, you have incubated a company, and you actually start developing your company, you hire people, and you go on to actually raise money. So it's funded by the universities, regions, and Vinnova, this kind of activity. And they charge zero equity to do this. It's all, but people are still skeptical, like, oh, Karolinska Innovation, what do you want from me? That's a cultural thing that we have to tear down those walls. It's really a great resource, to be honest. Colibri Ventures, we do want something from you. We're a bit more commercial. But we call ourselves a friendly neighborhood innovation office. But we also put money on the companies through a network of angels. And it was founded in 2019 by Fredrik Dahl, who was the entrepreneur behind Hello Genomics and Vanadis Diagnostics, and Simon Fredriksson, one of the co-founders of Olink. And we have a 330 square meter lab at Karolinska with offices and labs. in the campus, and when we take in a company, we work very closely with the company. They can be 1 to 2 researchers that have an idea, often 2, not less. They have a team, they have an idea of how to build it, so we actually join their team. I'm working part-time with the companies for them. And they become our portfolio companies, but the academy is more the earlier companies. And we're not alone in Sweden. This is a ecosystem map that looks like a metro station for how many startup innovators and support systems we have only in the Stockholm region. And it's a bit of a mess, actually. It's too many. But if you find the right one, they help you. So we talked about precision medicine, but we talk about precision innovation support also at Colibri. From a life science point of view, these are our national point of view, these are our now 10-ish companies that we're working with. One of them already sold out. It's a bit outdated there. But from a regional point of view, we start dividing these into biotech and medtech and so on. And from our point of view, each one is individual and unique. Their markets are unique. We have to take into the right people to be able to develop these technologies. So we don't see life science as one field. We see it as many, which is the whole idea of precision medicine also. Enabling innovation. So how to go away from getting your very first team together and really testing the idea. There is a lot of collaboration nodes with industry, and I believe that with recent times and so on, we need to move earlier with industry. We need to get exposure for idea. Often you sit in stealth mode and you hide it, but there's a lot of help to be getting out there. So Nordic Life Science Days, this annual meeting, which is in a couple of weeks from now, you meet a lot of industry representatives, and the young companies get a nice environment to pitch for them. EIT Health Network is for all of Europe. Business Sweden helps helps small companies get out. Ignite Sweden, another matchmaking with industry. And what is also interesting are industry-hosted programs. During the last session, Illumina mentioned their accelerator, but there's a lot of these kind of accelerator programs that can be accessible to you from any country, as long as you have a good idea and a good team. So Novo Nordisk has a couple of those. They have Novo Nordisk mentorship called NOME. AstraZeneca has one. And IQVIA, which I'm a consultant for, also has one, which is quite interesting. It just launched pan-European version. So if you're in health data, you should definitely look at joining the next accelerator program. You take this 8 weeks program, you get a mentor at this larger company, you get insights in the market, you get a lot of help. And it started in 2022 in only Israel, and now 2023, 10 startups from these countries were accepted. So it's pan-European, and you look out for the 2024 version. It's probably interesting if you're in health data. So funding innovation, which is the key term, how do we get money for these companies? It was a bit easier in 2021. You could basically pitch an idea with your professor and you would get money. But the interest rates related to this, I mean, money had very little value on the bank account for many people. So even people from, we had an accountant wanted to invest in these obscure biotechnology companies that they don't even understand what it was. It was an incredible environment. A lot of companies got a lot of money, but this doesn't last forever. So the actual figures, it's published annually by the Swedish Private Equity and Venture Capital Association, shows that if you look at the blue part of this one, that it went down nominally. It wasn't that big of a drop with the interest rate, but it doesn't show 2023's figures yet. So seed capital is the very early capital, and then startup capital is when the company has starting to sell. But at seed capital, it's even these kind of biotech ideas. And the amounts, though, will keep going up despite this. It's just that they shifted the money more towards companies that have revenue or have possibility for revenue. As part of our GDP, we're pretty close to the Baltics, if you're looking at it. We're spending on this kind of venture capital about 0.4% of our GDP. and which sectors. This is the sector that's interesting for this talk, but there in Sweden a lot of ICT companies are getting funded. Now the table changed a bit. Interest rates rose quickly. Now the investor, they will ask for an EBITDA, and many of the companies don't even know what the EBITDA is. Or what's becoming very popular is convertible loans, that they offer you convertible loans instead of real equity rounds, because then they can really negotiate based on your performance. So it's a tougher field. And if we look at Almi as a good example there, they used to do, you see how it grew quite quickly, Almi's investments. They were doing 15 investments per year and dropped radically to 5 investments. Even the state-owned investor got very cautious with startups that don't have revenue. And 2023 figures is going to be up a little. This is so far, 2023, only 5 investments. Now, how does this kind of relate to reality? If I still have a little time. This, we saw many pictures about this, how DNA sequencing dropped in price, became more affordable, and that creates this splash of clinical potential when a whole genome can cost $100 or $200, and that's really like an evolution of instruments and possibilities there, and we even have spatially located sequences and so on. So Genomic Medicine Sweden has really been taking this ride to try to cross the chasm with this kind of technology. And many times when we pitched Genomic Medicine Sweden, we were saying the new sequencing technologies and so on. They weren't new, they're 15 years old. But this new for healthcare, and that's the time for healthcare to be mature enough to start thinking about doing this for real in routine. A historical context with Genomics Medicine Sweden, there were these facilities at SciLife Lab called Clinical Genomics Uppsala and Stockholm that were founded in 2014, early 2013-14. And then it's branched out to Lund and Gothenburg. So there were 4 clinical sequencing units. We got a small grant of, I think, 300,000 euros, basically, to get started. And that was a lot of work to get that money, but it got the 4 universities together. They united, and then we got a bigger grant from Vinnova, where the 4 universities became 7 universities. All the university hospitals were invited to join. And then we became 14 partners from 2018, and then it really started scaling up with governmental support. The organization, we call it the braid, like the hair braid, is where we started. We had all these ideas of all these reference groups, and the patient should be on the top, and then all the aspects of biobanking and what kind of assays to run genomic medicine in Sweden. And now 2023, this evolved to quite an advanced structure with real governing steering boards, representatives all over the country, and all these ethical and legal packages to really work out the quirks. So this is really crossing the chasm in reality, what Genomic Medicine Sweden is doing, and I'm very proud of my old colleagues there that they keep up the fight and the work. And what has it resulted in? It results in a lot of sequencing. I mean, this is the figures from 2021, but roughly 22,000 samples were sequenced on an annual basis. And I know 2023, it's looking like 2022 was 27,000 samples, so it's growing. Roughly of these samples, 25% are whole genome, 10-15% whole exome, and the rest are these big gene panels for cancer applications. And this is being rolled out in the whole country. And I think the pediatric group are one of the front runners, because they are coming to a point where the pediatric cancers will be routine to kind of sequence like this within Sweden. And we are building and got recently a new grant for launching the National Genomic Platform, which will host all this data and make it available for research and innovation. So, but I mean, what we notice from these big sequencing runs and so on is that the DNA is not enough. You need to look at other levels of omics. You need to really understand what's going on in the disease. So the part of crossing the chasm and always being in a hurry to get the majority group of users is not necessarily a good thing. You can go back to academia and industry and foster technology that becomes important for healthcare in the future, and it's really a good environment to be in the academia and industry. And what the next generation sequencing instrument also is, it's a next generation sequencing microscope with, thanks to all these oligos that we're reading from it, you can barcode things and you can start seeing spatial resolution of tissues or cells for both proteomics and transcriptomics. So there's a ton of cool applications to be doing here. And how does the research market look like? I mean, it's incredible, the amount of publications being published every year. It's a market by itself, for sure, and it's a big market. And these are the different areas of the world publishing. And to finish off a little with one use case that I have close to heart right now is a talented team from Karolinska Institute who are working on a single-cell sequencing method for how to get RNA splicing alternatives and isoform resolution using standardized equipment. And I mean, the single cell idea is quite obvious. You look at the smoothie and you just think that you bulk RNA-seq solves everything. But if you look at each individual component, you start learning more about each cell and what actually goes on there. And previously, this alternative splicing has been overlooked, and now we're noticing very interesting patterns by getting longer reads on the RNA molecules and finding pathological stories with that. So that was actually my last slide, so thank you for listening.
Round of applause for Michael. Thank you, Michael. So before we proceed to the quick fireside chat, I'm making some notes, for some questions. Please have a seat. We'll have the last but not the least speaker talking about the role of technologies in health data use, because we're speaking about innovations, but one of the instruments is to utilize the power of tech. So Arnolds, Bogdanovs from Longenesis, please welcome on stage.
Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm going to talk about trends in health data use for research and innovation. And first, my bragging slide. So a little bit about myself. So I'm a lead software engineer at Longenesis. I have experience working with solutions in both genetics and oncology. I've helped in total to onboard more than 600,000 participants in various studies, trials, initiatives. And I became a little bit of a scientist myself as well by becoming a co-author to 2 papers. Never thought that would happen, but here I am. So what is Longenesis, who we are? We are one of the leading health tech startups in the Baltics. We work with both private and public sector, work with multiple research institutes in more than 10 disease domains. We've published multiple papers as well, and we work also with hospitals, for example, such hospitals as Children's University Hospital here in Riga. The main challenge that we're trying to address is accelerating medical research. And for example, clinical trial is a long and arduous ordeal to get the new drugs and therapeutics from a concept into the hands of the patients. And it's being slowed down by multiple aspects, such as, for example, 86% of trials being postponed or canceled outright due to lack of data quality and compliance issues. 9 out of 10 clinical sites are overlooked. So, for example, even if a hospital would have access to the potential participants that will match the clinical trial parameters, they're never found. So almost 90% of people are never addressed. And 45% of patients show lack of participation or they just drop out, which further exacerbates the quality of collected data. So what is health data? Actually, it's any data that is related to health. It's either electronic patient records, it can be blood tests, it can be prescriptions, it can be any sort of physical activity data that is collected by Fitbit or other health apps, and it can be even questionnaires or the screening questions that we answer about our health, and even social media posts posted that you are sick today. That's health data, technically. Yeah, so why is it important? How does it help health research? It facilitates evidence-based drug and therapy development. So it's already data that is available. It doesn't have to be gathered again. It just needs to be analyzed, and the insights can be used for research. It's accelerating potential identification of participants. So if we have more information about the health of the potential participants, so we can easily identify them and easily engage them for potential studies. And last but not least, but there are much more, of course, it's helping to perform market research and to do post-market validation, such as pharmacovigilancy, for example. But yeah, it would be really nice if it would be easy to use this data just out of the box, but there are many challenges. It's usually fragmented. So for example, a CT scan of me can be in one hospital, a chest x-ray in some regional hospital somewhere else, and a blood work done in some laboratory. And all this data is spread out, and it's really hard to get it together. Another problem is sometimes data is not collected. Many clinical sites, for example, do not collect data sufficiently about multiple procedures. They just do it, for example, in the paper format, just for compliance reasons. And that's not data that is easily usable in research. Another problem is that sometimes there's too much data collected. There's no organization in data. It's messy, it's too much, and it's infringing on the data regulations. So that's very, very hard to use this data in research. And last, and I would say one of the most important points is actually that participants themselves do not have sufficient control over their data. They're not empowered to make decisions about their data after they have given their consent. So some of these problems can be addressed using data centralization. So how does it usually happen if, for example, multiple centers want to collaborate together on research? Usually one of the centers becomes the data owner, data controller, and everybody pulls their data together into one place, and it basically it creates a lot of problems, such as there are additional security risks involved with this. So there's a lot of data transfers that make data vulnerable in transit. All of the data is stored in one place, so it's asking for just one nasty cybersecurity incident for all data to be affected. And it's, of course, causing resistance from the healthcare institutions that would then share their data less. And due to the risks potentially with ethics or ownership issues. So if they all pull this data together into some other centers, data centers, they cannot always be sure that this data does not get used further or for any other publications, or maybe even licensed, and then they do not get any benefits from this data that they collected themselves initially. And that, of course, creates issues complying with data regulatory laws. So if you want to do a cross-border study, for example, a center in Germany, due to the regulations that prohibit to send data abroad, health data specifically, they cannot collaborate with any other center in any other European country, for example, that also has similar data laws. So their collaboration is impossible in a data centralization model. So what is our philosophy? What are we trying to propose? Is to help the clinical centers, the healthcare centers and participants to transform themselves from data donors into data value co-creators. There is an example of one tool that we have created that is helping with participant identification called Curator, that helps to potentially identify participants without their data leaving any healthcare institutions. So it's using just metadata, just descriptive data to create a dashboard in which, in real time, any potential study sponsor or collaborator can take a look into a data set and find what kind of participants are potentially onboardable. Then they can send a data request or a request for collaboration to the institutions and start their partnership without any data being sent to anybody. In another case, say when you already have the data, but you need to get some sort of insights or value from it, there usually a very good approach is to use a trusted research environment. And those are the kind of software environments that allow researchers to collaborate together under very strict data control regulations. So data cannot be easily downloaded or transferred anywhere else, but every researcher can run some sort of allowed pre-approved scripts or use pre-approved tools. For example, machine learning algorithm training or statistical analysis. And that way they can get the value from the data, but not send it anywhere else and collaborate dynamically on cloud. In other cases, when, say, that previous slide, so there was it's an example from Azure Cloud. So in this case, the data does travel to one secure location, but afterwards gets archived. In other cases, for example, when that is not preferentiable, it's also possible to do the same thing in a decentralized manner. So there is a study published by Dare UK that tested feasibility of creating the federated kind of trusted research environment where all of the computations would be happening locally on the healthcare institutions, and the data would not be leaving anywhere ever. That's when we have data. But what if we don't have any data yet? So how do we actually collect primary data with participants? What are the issues there? So here, maybe you can see it, maybe not really. So the typical situation is that it's very difficult to get any prospective data. So once the study concludes, it's very difficult to get any additional data from the participants. So what happens is that after clearing IRB, getting the approvals to run the study, the healthcare research institutions onboard the participants who sign the consent forms. They collect some sort of biomaterial, perhaps a questionnaire of lifestyle is filled, and that generates data. That generates insights, and in the end, it prompts, of course, new research questions. So once you have these new research questions, how do you actually answer them? It's very, very difficult to re-engage the participants. They usually have moved on with their lives, they forgot about the study, and they never generate any prospective data and any other insights. For participants, again, participating in any studies, the problems are, of course, the they cannot control the flow of data, it's not always easy to drop out of the studies and ensure that even partial data that you have provided does not get used afterwards in the study. And there's also issues of motivation, usually, that the typical situation is either they get some sort of monetary reward, or they just get a thank you for your participation screen in the end, and maybe a link with study results 2 years later. But that's usually not very, not enough. So one of the tools that we've created is called Engage. It's a participant engagement module. It comes packed with dynamic e-consent, in which participants can manage their participation in the studies dynamically, so they can drop out or drop back into the studies dynamically. They can be invited for new studies and participate right there after signing the consent forms. And they're also motivated by special tools that researchers can create using our platform, such as personalized risk reports or lifestyle suggestions for improving the health. That way, the participants get the benefits from the study immediately and are more motivated to participate in them. This tool is ISO 27001 certified, so its highest security standards are followed in it. And with this tool, we have cleared more than 10 IRBs, I think. So it's been used in practice multiple times. As well, it has also qualified electronic signature integrations, which are very important in EU because they are equivalent to a handwritten signature, and that way you can sign all of the documents with highest degree of security. How does it work in practice? What are some use cases that we have done? The first one that I would like to talk about is screenings.lv. It's a breast cancer awareness and education platform for women here in Latvia. It's a big problem here. Breast cancer is one of the most prevalent types of cancer for women. And in this platform, women can fill in a lifestyle questionnaire and get a personalized risk report with suggestions on how to improve their lifestyle so that the risk goes down. In cases of really high risk, they are motivated to go on a checkup immediately and decrease the risk of unsuccessful treatment of cancer if they have it. So more than 7,000 women participated in this initiative. And with their consent and with providing these digital tools to manage it further, we've created a metadata kind of mini biobank, if you will, not a biobank, sorry, a registry, a mini registry with their metadata where our partners could see how many and what kind of women do we have in our data set without exposing any of their personal information. And one of the partners did just that. That was a contraceptive producer who wanted to find out the attitudes of Latvian women towards contraception and to find out, to educate about the myths around contraception and to find out whether, their new product would be of interest to women here. So they've invited the women that they deemed to be of interest to this initiative, and more than 2,000 women in the end participated, which is very remarkable because a similar initiative, without using any digital tools or our tools, only got a similar result in a few years as we have in 1.5 months. So it's very, very quick. The results have been published also in academic publications. One more thing, though I wanted to mention is also that in this case, the insights from the study were sent to our partner, but no data from the women were sent to it. So it's again privacy preserving. Another use case that we had is type 1 diabetes quality of life study that we've done with Medtronic, the producer of various medical devices. And in this case, they wanted to know how does the quality of life improve of the type 1 diabetes patients when they're using an insulin pump. So in this case, we did not have actually access to the data, so it was a registry, a separate registry from which we could get the metadata. And we've, together with Medtronic, during, I think it was like one call or a few hours, we could identify 300 patients that would be deemed useful for the study, and 87 participants have participated in the study, generating very valuable insights for Medtronic, and their data, again, not being sent anywhere. And the last, not least, but the biggest is actually the National Genome Program in UAE that we are supporting with our tools. So there was a keynote by Dr. Ahmed yesterday, so some of you might have seen. So he mentioned that they are using our tools. So in this particular initiative, more than 500,000 participants are already there. They all have access to the digital dynamic consent provided by us. So the collection is happening all around the UAE in all the 7 Emirates, 100 locations, and it has cleared 3 distinct governmental bodies. So they don't have one Department of Health, they have 3, and we've cleared all of them partially also thanks to our solution. In this study, the participants have full control over their data. If they want to drop out, they can, then do so dynamically, and if they don't drop out, they can continue to contribute to accelerating the healthcare research in their own home country, and thus fulfilling the national goals. So main takeaways, what can we after engaging more than 600,000 people in various initiatives and research and all around the globe almost, what are some key takeaways? Well, participants are more willing to participate in studies if they have control over their data. If they know they can drop out at any moment, then they're more willing to participate. There's less perceived risk. Ensuring privacy and safety is not a cost, it's not an obligation that is a burden. It's actually a way to achieve better results. And yeah, digital trials and digital research is here to stay. It's just one single most efficient way to engage a lot of people and do it much more ethically. Thank you for your attention.
Yes, please, Arnolds, stay, and I would like to invite Michael and Jaanus to the table. We do have 15 minutes. We will change a bit the concept, not the fireside chat, but rather, you know, a warm-up before the conclusion session and the reception with a glass of wine. So these 3 distinguished gentlemen are the ones to be caught there. So we'll try, to do some advertising better to make, a pie hot in terms of communication and talks. So I have, for each one of you, I have, like just 2 questions. So some of the, key takeaway I try to concise from the slides, and then, let's put it more, philosophical, like call to action to wrap up your thoughts and your vector in terms of the presentation. So let's start with Jaanus. So you mentioned, two small follow-up questions. So you mentioned that the first thing, and I think on Wednesday you mentioned that the legislation for biobanking was drafted in 3 months time, and so super fast. So I think we're, in neighboring countries, we're struggling for years fighting each other, you know, and trying to find the best way. So the question is, do you think that the policy-making legislation was the main basement to kickstart all of the innovations coming from the genetic research? And the second follow-up question, so you mentioned antigenes, but do you think that Estonian Genome Bank, with all of the investments coming from your taxpayers, from EU, is the foundation for the startups and spin-offs? So is this the aim as well, or not?
Well, the first is a question I would just have to calm down your enthusiasm. It was 20 years ago when it was impossible to do in 3 months. Today it would take 1.5 years at least, and if possible at all. So the attitude has changed tremendously, and I have said it already that fortunately or unfortunately we are consider ourselves already the boring Nordic country, which things takes time and need very much consensus. So that's why, yeah, probably this is to answer your question. Yeah, and today the attitude is changed a bit. If what is, yeah, this is a great sort of source or depository where you can actually base, and where I know that. Currently, the University of Tartu is working to actually start a company to commercialize this.
So you start calling yourself not a digital nation, but deep tech nation. I saw Tonu Esko post.
Yeah, this is Tonu Esko is actually doing this. I understand this is not decided finally, but the preparatory work has been in process for several months, if not a year. And of course, I have heard that there is Estonian investor base who actually has shown up willingness to invest together with the university. But this will be, I don't know exactly what is the details, but this seems to be. There has been several attempts, although I've been also during the years to commercialize this database, in the sense to go with some investors, but of course it's quite sensitive topic to convince politicians to make a decision. It's basically, and the government of the university, because people are. It's a sensitive data, which you have to get. Consensus, and quite often you don't get the consensus on this, how to commercialize. Do you give out what kind of exclusive rights? Of course, there's a conflict between the researchers, because currently this is a research base, and the researchers are quite free. Just the main constriction is, or the limits is actually, do you get the ethical committee permission? But there is no commercial problems. Now the question, as I mentioned again, that should we go back to the data participants or donors with a new understanding. 20 years ago, it was clearly that blanket consent, informed consent was okay. Today they ask if it's really informed consent. So there's a lot of obstacles, but of course there's a great value. And of course, in Sweden, Finland, and there's a lot of other countries which similar type of population-based genomic initiatives, as we heard already, is going on. So there's a lot of competition. So yeah, I think it's opportunity, but we are not there. So.
And just a quick question to conclude. So about this perception and the changes in perception within the society as well as policymakers. So one of the aims is to build trust with citizens in order to engage broader population. And you mentioned 1.5 hour long questionnaire that they need to fill in. You know, when I had a call with our central statistical bureau, and they're calling, do you have like a short time for a questionnaire? It's like, okay, how much? And she said 35 minutes. I'm dropping out the call, you know, because I don't have 35 minutes. 1.5 hour long. How do you persuade Estonians to take part in that? What's the motivation there?
As I said, this was done by initially by the GPs. So GPs got remuneration for this time, And of course, for the patient, it was also opportunity to get sort of longer engagement with his or her GP.
So you extrapolate this to the clinical practice, all
Yeah,
of the
this was
questionnaire.
actually part of, and for GPs also, they got a better understanding of the patient base. So, of course, again, it was mainly in 2000s, before 2010 and up to 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Today we have a situation where we have already so the lack of GPs. Several GP lists do not have a GP because the number of GPs have been reached to the retirement age. So we are now our main, if we look to the other side, from healthcare side, our main concern is how to reform our primary healthcare system because of the aging population, more chronic diseases, and this is a conflict again. That there's no. Today you cannot convince GP to spend 1.5 hours just to work with the patient.
Sure. It's a global challenge
That's
indeed.
it.
So Michael, I haven't seen, this bold number on the slide, but it caught my mind. So 0% shareholders, like shares, universities holding nothing in the spin-offs and startups. When we're discussing here in Baltics, also in Latvia, we have agencies for, controlling the taxpayer money, and it will be basically in some cases not a crime but something to investigate, because if we're spending money and there is an LTD company with a shining, smiling, millionaire who was a scientist a day ago, we would have some troubles. How do you do this in Sweden?
We have a couple of those. Yeah, I mean, it is a law, simply. So the university can't take ownership, but it can offer services and take ownership as part of collaborating and helping. And the universities have evolved their innovation structures. Some very advanced, I would say. Gothenburg University has one of the strongest innovation support systems, and they made quite a lot of money on the successful startups to continue to fund it. But the university hasn't been funding that kind of activity. There's been a big debate about this internally. So, I mean, you go to your university, they offer services, and they can also offer money for equity when it's very cheap. And that's kind of the model that has been adopting the last 10 years, and successfully also, because it also forces the university to do something for your idea. Not only you invented it here, therefore I own 100% of it. I mean, I went to Stanford as a postdoc. You sign off all the rights. They own everything of the IP.
So basically it stands on the whales of indirect value from Swedish scientists generating ROI.
Yeah, exactly. The Swedish scientist is then, with support systems, supposed to generate value out of this for taxpayer purposes and for employment purposes. And it kind of works. They do. I mean, we have a lot of startups who employ people out of the same lab and so on. So it employs quite a lot of people out of it also. And then Swedish government is happy, I guess. But there are people who are against it also.
No, just, remember once I was in Cambridge University, one of the deans of one of the colleges, he came back to do a keynote with a private helicopter. So he's a scientist himself. So he and 2 more scientists out-licensed one of the molecules of the drug to, I think, Astra or some big pharma for, 9 zeros in the checksum. And he says, I love science, I don't need money anymore. Is it the same in Sweden?
There are a couple of those kind of examples, but there's also you're the advocate for an idea that maybe industry doesn't understand or it's not ready yet. So you have to take a lot of personal responsibility and a lot of risk in order to envision that it really becomes something. And I mean, for that you get rewarded if you do it. But it does come with maybe nobody believes in it when you come with it.
What is the perception of scientists to do this? Because you have your 9 to 5 or some hours job a day, and then you need to do extra job, and it may not pay off. What's the vibe there?
I mean, before, traditionally, there was a bit of a ugly thing to commercialize. The attitude was, commercialization, that's kind of a yuppie thing. Then with the younger generation, it became very trendy to commercialize. Suddenly, every professor has like, I have a startup for that, I have a startup for that.
We
And
had
they-
these keynotes, you know. We had these
Yeah.
keynotes. You remember? One of the keynotes was like last slide. Actually, I have a startup, you know.
Yeah,
so you know,
exactly.
in the
Yeah,
lessons.
everyone has a start. And unfortunately, some of those startups is two professors owning 100% of the company, nobody doing anything, and it's just sitting there, and the patent will start costing money, and then they drop it. So
Okay.
that happens also. It's really about engaging the people who make something out of it.
So
And the
it's,
postdocs, PhD students, early entrepreneurs who dare run with it like you did, kind of work with it, make it something out of it.
okay, so it's like natural selection. in
Yeah,
so-
and
sort
then
of a
there are
sense,
those
market
cases.
selection.
There are those cases where a big pharma company absorbs the idea. It's so fantastic from the beginning, and you have a license and you sit on royalties. So of course that exists, but the more common version, I would say, is that you have to prove the idea yourself and get it to a phase where they see the value of it.
Yeah, so coming back to the digital tech, I think Jaanus touched based on, you know, the lack of GPs, which is a global problem. So no one would like to do 1.5-hour questionnaire anymore, even a 30-minute questionnaire, even 10-minute questionnaire. In our case, we had a lot of resistance in terms of that. So what in terms of digital tech, can it actually assist in such cases where we can maybe cut the, you know, not the tiger, but the elephant in the room into pieces and help to engage broader population, ease the GP process? And yeah.
Yeah. This on?
I think so.
Yeah. So I think definitely. So one of the things that can be done, for example, is that the participation can be done at leisure, like whenever the participant has time, so they can do a small bit of the such questionnaire that will be a say half an hour long or 1.5 hours long. So since we can using digital tech actually involve participants remotely, then yeah, they can do it when they have time. It doesn't have to be at the point of contact when they come to the GP. Yeah, I think that's one of the main things. And there are more avenues also to motivate people. So maybe at the GP they come, oh, why do I have to do this 1.5 hour questionnaire if I'm not sick, if I'm not right now, you know, having a problem? Does it actually help my treatment? If it doesn't, then why should I do it? But with digital tech, there are more avenues to make it rewarding for the participants.
Speaking of the burden, you know, or a whip concept, so a lot of presentations during these 2 days we're talking about, you know, their process being on paper, still on paper, also consent bills still on paper. But on the other hand, okay, digital, we can digitalize it. Everyone, I think, is sure about that. But on the other side, we have a camp of people, you know, perceiving digital tech and this consent or other mechanism as a whip or as a burden, because, you know, now you have a broad consent, you can, you know, deal with your stuff, you know the drill, and then you need to give the mechanism to someone there on the other side of the table for them to decide. So is it more of a whip or is it actually an enabler, like speaking of the same, you know, Middle East concept or EU concept?
I think in general, it, you know, like any technology can be used for both good and bad. I think that it's now more of a enabler than a whip. So it used to be that, you know, digital tech, when it first started appearing, you know, when we have these companies that created digital patient records, and, you know, like we have here in Latvia also several companies, they've monopolized the data controls, you know, and they eventually, at first, they were a very convenient way to, you know, store data and to manage data, but over time they became more of a burden because their business models were outdated and they needed to, you know, earn money somehow from that. And I think now it's more of an enabler because a lot of people realize that we need to put the patient's center first and foremost, and it is showing good results when we do things that way. So I think it's definitely an enabler now.
So bearing fruits from the data-driven dialogue. Gents, we have just 2 minutes left, and the wine is waiting. Let's do the following. So you know the faces of the speakers. Let's do a sum up, so people know with which topic or which philosophy to approach you during the wine reception. So Jaanus, what would you like to, for people to be left in their heads once leaving and once enjoying wine from your topic?
Well, I think this.
Please use the mic. Thank you.
Sorry, I think it's always worth to try. And then to look because this is good from a Swedish system, for example. That there's a lot of buzz, and I've been meeting a lot of Swedish healthcare workers, doctors, who have been actually developing new products. A lot of them fail, but actually there's a very, very so. Most important, if you don't try, you never get there.
Golden words.
Thank you. I mean, from the whole conference, not only from this session, what I take home is a bit of this opportunity to not build a lot of silos and create all these structures that stop innovation. And they existed and they were built. And I mean, Sweden is a good example, but we have a lot of structures that are supposed to do a lot of overlapping stuff. And that kind of hinders innovation to really occur. I mean, then you have to fight the old system. So with all these new digital tools and patient empowerment and consent forms, I mean, it's an amazing opportunity to actually, everyone can sit with their genome in their telephone in reality. It's not that big. And with the bank ID kind of systems, approve. And that maybe not everyone would like that, but that's the reality of patient empowerment.
Michael, I think you really like the Jaanus first and last slide because referring to the gene in the mobile phone.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, maybe not at the booth, but in your telephone. You order it from Amazon.
Not on paper, Jaanus. Yeah, not on paper.
Not on paper, no.
Arnold, please.
I think that the main thing is that, digital health innovations are here. There are a lot of things that, being developed now, they will come here and stay with us. I think that the important thing is not to fight it, but try to embrace it. I mean, the same thing comes with AI, right? A lot of people are afraid of it. A lot of people are, think to ban it, but I don't think that's a good approach. Like, we need to adapt it and see the opportunities in all of this, like, because the good results are coming in, and I think that we need more of that.
The history comes in cycles. Yeah, we were afraid of fire, and then we start using it. We were afraid of cinema and the moving train, and then we start utilizing it. Great. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause for our panelists and speakers. And once again, before leaving to enjoy your Friday evening, please enjoy the glass of wine and the reception in the restaurant where you had lunch for 2 days. Thank you once again. See you around. For this.